Infrastructure Committee member Nancy Mace, a Congresswoman. Good to see you. Thanks very much for being here. Your reaction to Nancy Pelosi going for another term?
Right. Nancy Pelosi might get reelected in her gerrymandered district this coming year, but she's not going to be Speaker of the House again because Republicans are going to win the majority this year. And if she wants to be the minority leader next session, I guess she and the Democrats can make that decision next year when we rule the House.
Well, let's talk about that, because when you look at her district in California, it's a mess, Congresswoman. I mean, the crime spikes, the smash and grabs, the boxes on the train tracks. Just really, Governor Gavin Newsom said it looked like a third world country, and it does. Why is it that we don't see any accountability for her own district? You say she may get reelected in her own district, but what has she done for that district?
What has the left done for the American people over the last year? Because it's not just Nancy Pelosi's district that's suffering. It's every city across the country has seen a massive spike in crime. We've seen that, on the streets of every major city in the U.S. over the last 2 years. We've seen inflation skyrocket. And everyone's worried about the border of Ukraine, but no one seems worried about the border at the southern region of our country, where we had almost 2 million apprehensions this year of illegal immigrants. And I will tell you, I sit on oversight as well, and we had one hearing on the border last year. And guess what? It was about the northern border, not the southern border. So I would tell you the leftist policies that Nancy Pelosi's been leading since she's been Speaker of the House have been a disaster, not only for her district, but for every hardworking American in this country.
So what can the Republicans do about it at this point? I mean, look, you've got from economic to foreign policy erupting in crises. The administration is now saying that the U.S. is prepared to impose sanctions and export controls on Russia should Russia invade Ukraine. President Biden says he has no idea what Putin will do next. In fact, yesterday he was asked the question. He says, well, it's like reading the tea leaves. What do you say?
Right. Well, last week, even, and the State Department had to correct President Biden, but he said at his press conference that everyone was on pins and needles for that. He showed the entire world, including Putin, his hand on Ukraine, and the hand was empty at that point. And they've had to walk many of his statements back, which is really scary when we're talking about the world stage and real threats from Russia and from China. When we have our own crises here at home, the number one thing that we need to do is Republicans need to win back the House this year to reverse some of these horrific policies that we've seen that have disastrous consequences at the grocery store, at the gas pump, on jobs and wages. But the second thing that Republicans need to do, it's not enough to bash the left or to bash Nancy Pelosi or President Biden's bad policies. We actually have to come up with solutions for inflation and maybe talk about curbing the spending, because Republicans and Democrats for decades have contributed to out of control spending. We've contributed to higher taxes in this country. And so what are we going to do that's better, that will create better and healthier families, better workforce, better jobs, better wages, and reduce and reverse some of the inflation that we're all seeing, and also address the border? These are things that Republicans need to have solutions for going forward into the midterms, and not only to get elected, but actually to do something when we do have that power, when we are in the majority next year.
Yeah, well, what about inflation? I mean, the Biden administration says it's going to outline tighter regulations for U.S. meat packers. Biden is blaming inflation on the meat packing conglomerates, he said. He also said that the fact that oil is up 60% year over year, it's the oil company's fault.
It's everyone else's fault.
But blaming his spending plans at all, Congresswoman.
Yeah, I think he would have higher approval ratings if he admitted some of the mistakes and blunders of his administration in the first year. And last week he said inflation was non-existent. It was just a media craze or media frenzy showing empty shelves. I can tell you, when I went to the grocery store a few days ago, I couldn't get about 25% of the items my kids and I wanted for the house to eat over the weekend. So I see it every day. Hardworking families see it. He also blames supply chain issues for inflation. That's part of it. But the spending that we're talking about that we've done over the last few years and during COVID, and the Build Back Better, any future spending, the taxes that were in the infrastructure bill, 42 new taxes, all of this is contributing to our inflation woes, and wages cannot keep up. And so he wants to blame everyone but himself. And I appreciate when there's alleged, things that are happening in industries that shouldn't be, price gouging, et cetera. But what is he going to do to fix it? This is his problem, not theirs.
Here's Steve Forbes. Go ahead, Steve, jump in.
Congresswoman, you rightly talk about the Republicans needing something positive. Are you going to put together a good, vigorous tax cut proposal to put before the American people? Your state and other states are cutting taxes, while Washington wants to raise them. Maybe something like the flat tax or a big tax cut like Reagan did.
Oh, I would love to do that. I would love to see greater tax cuts or a fairer either consumption tax, flat tax, fair tax. When you look at, and I explain this to my kids, and when they look at their allowance, which is $10 a week, and if I were to take half of it right off the bat for the federal government, and then you're going to pay mom a tax every time you need something or want to buy something, they're like, oh my gosh, we're only left with a few dollars. And I'm like, of course, right? This is how the government works. But they're not there yet. One of the things that I would like to see happen, I'm a big fan of the penny plan. And I think balancing the budget would go a long way. It could be bipartisan, but the penny plan would take a penny off for every future dollar of federal spending. You balance the budget in 5, 6, or 7 years. And then after that, you can increase spending by 10% and change annually. And that's something that I believe that Democrats and Republicans could work together and would go a long way to helping fix some of our economic woes.
Yeah, I think you make great points. By the way, Congresswoman, how much do we lose on producing pennies, right? I mean, isn't it right. more costly to produce the copper, the penny, as it is to produce a nickel? I mean, we're still producing pennies. For sure. How much would that save?
Right, exactly. And all the fraud and abuse, every agency can afford to cut a penny for every dollar they spend, every single federal agency. This isn't hard. Businesses had to do it during COVID-19. So, too, should the federal government.
Yeah. Steve, did you have a comment?
I think the cutting is great. Cutting is great, but put that tax cut out there, Congresswoman. The American people need it, and states are some states are even abolishing the state income tax.
All right.
As they should.
We will leave it there.